Greetings Exiles, this is Cod Raziel coming to you with Sir Reginald Amadeus Fortescue III and Frank. And today we're bringing you a video guide on my RighteouSplosion Juggernaut. This is part of the RighteouSplosion Sixpack that I mentioned about a week ago. The Juggernaut's main role in the RighteouSplosion Sixpack is taking on content such as Atziri or Uber Labyrinth, basically just tough bosses. Now this is basically just a standard run-of-the-mill Righteous Fire Juggernaut with some extra essence juice to make it all the more powerful. We use Righteous Fire as our main method for dealing with trash mobs, and we use our Cyclone to proc elemental equilibrium as well as our Splosions, which is the essence of Hysteria mod that it crafts on weapons. While at the same time our Cyclone is healing us for a lot via life gain on hit, and it's keeping our Fortify up, so that's great. From my testing, it's managed to survive all the setups of Izara at, maximum buffs, 3 keys and whatnot, and even double elemental, which is something that I've had trouble with in the past. While it was able to do double elemental, I wouldn't recommend doing double elemental on hardcore, as it can be a little dangerous. But any other setup, attack speed, damage and so on is quite well mitigated by our physical damage reduction. Now, this version is probably the most tanky version, because we get a large amount of effect on our Fortify. We can do this build while watching TV quite comfortably, as it doesn't require us to pay attention all the time. As far as gearing goes, this is probably the cheapest version of the build, since it doesn't require a Calm's Heart. Problems with this build is that it feels slow in parties. It's not as fast as, say, Cast Breeze Cast on Crit or Pathfinder, Blade Vortex, any of those sorts of tier 1 meta builds, as they would be called. And the fact that it uses essences can greatly adjust the cost of playing the build. So today it might be a budget build, tomorrow it'll be a really expensive build. We don't know. Okay, so let's quickly go over the passive tree. Starting with our Ascendancy. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go through to Unflinching for the extra endurance charge, and then to Unrelenting for the increased damage per endurance charge, the reduced elemental damage taken while at maximum endurance charges, and that reasonably small chance to gain all of your endurance charges instead of one, which is quite helpful for bosses. Next up, we're taking Unyielding, which basically increases the damage we do while we have Fortify. Gives us 1.5% life regen, that's quite a lot, and it gives us 25% increased effective Fortify. This takes Fortify from 20% reduction to 25% reduction, which is really nice. As for the passives themselves, we're coming out of the life and armor nodes from the Marauder, grabbing life regeneration and Warrior's Blood for that extra life regen. Going up to Heart of the Warrior for some really nice life. Through Born to Fight gives us accuracy rating, but more so it's just a way to get out of the Marauder tree. From there we're going to the right, picking up the Jewel Socket for an attack speed accuracy rating jewel preferably. And then into Constitution and picking up these life nodes a little later on when we need them. Next up we're going through to Shaper for the 1% life regen, and into this Jewel Socket here, which we can even use a Intuitive Leap Jewel to get these 2 area of effect radius nodes. And finally coming into Elemental Equilibrium. This should not be picked up until you're doing Righteous Fire and you have no flat fire damage on your gear, as well as having some other elemental damage, like Cold or Lightning. Following that, we're going through Combat Stamina. This gives us 1.8% life regen, 5% life, and a decent amount of armor for those 3 points. I had to pick up Expertise as I required some extra dexterity for the build. There's not much in the way of dexterity in this build at all. Next up we're going through Devotion. grabbing the endurance charge, elementalist to amplify through retribution for the attack and cast speed. We grab precision for the increased accuracy rating and attack speed. This is a very efficient node if you're using undeniable, which is the 4th ascendancy that I decided to pick, as this makes us hit more and it makes us hit faster. So we pick up this efficient attack speed and accuracy rating node, which also gives us a little bit of movement speed. Come down through discipline and training, really nice life node, into sanctity, which is a nice regen and armor node. Going up from there, we come through to purity of flesh, just for that extra chaos resistance. If we don't have chaos resistance, it becomes the most dangerous thing to us. Explosive impact for the increased AoE as well as decent fire damage. And finally elemental overload, which will be procced by our explosions more often than not. Also our cyclone can proc this. Coming down from there, we've got the barbarism node, which gives us 1% maximum fire resistance, quite nice for a righteous fire build. Next up, we're grabbing stamina from the life regeneration per endurance charge side, so that we can get some extra regen when our endurance charge is up, which should be all the time. Next, we're picking up our namesake, Juggernaut, which gives us some increased armor, some increased life, and some life recovery from flasks, which is actually a lot nicer than you would think. Next, we're grabbing Bloodless just for the extra life. Now, the difference in the Juggernaut build from the others is most notably the Rampart node. Now, these two nodes together give us 15% extra effective fortify, which brings the total up to 28% damage reduction, which is then stacked additively with the 8% reduced elemental damage taken from Unrelenting, giving us a total of 36% reduced elemental damage taken while fortify is up. This helps us deal with the elemental damage that Izaro can pull off. Next, we're going for Vigor, the last endurance charge we need, as well as Golem's Blood for that extra regen. Then coming up into Master of the Arena, that +2 melee weapon and unarmed range is quite nice because it makes our Cyclone's radius larger. Coming through Bravery for some armor and life. And finally landing up on Art of the Gladiator, which is another attack speed and accuracy rating node, which also removes movement penalties from our armor. Since we're using armor based gear, this can be quite a benefit. And just some extra dexterity because this build is very hungry for dexterity. For leveling, you can go any melee build, any area of effect fire damage build like Firestorm. You can basically just level with any fire build. Now the kind of jewels we want on the Juggernaut are a little bit different from the others, since we prefer these attack speed and % accuracy rating jewels with life on them. This one was reasonably cheap, I think it cost me 2 chaos. As for our gear, we're using the Essence of Delirium glove craft, which is socketed gems deal 30% more damage over time, and we're socketing our Righteous Fire in that, along with increased burning damage, increased area of effect, and elemental focus. For bosses, the increased area of effect can be swapped for concentrated effect for even more damage. It's worth noting that a quality Righteous Fire is quite useful for us because our explosions scale with spell damage. Next up, our belt is just a life resistances armor if you can, +1 maximum endurance charges belt. These can be relatively expensive. This one was 25 to 30 chaos, somewhere there around. It's not required that you have the +1 maximum endurance charges, but with the Juggernaut especially, it's nice to have as many endurance charges as we can. For boots, I'm just using some rare boots with life, resistances, and movement speed. You can also use Death's Door here, but I didn't find that necessary on the Juggernaut version of the build. Rings, we're using Calm's Way, which is giving us 0.4% life regenerated per endurance charge, as well as an additional endurance charge. Other ring, the Pariah with the red socket giving us plus 100 maximum life, socketed in that, a level 21 Purity of Fire. If you don't have a level 21 Purity of Fire, the ring's usefulness becomes far less, and as a result you may want to instead put the Purity of Fire somewhere in your gear and replace this with a life and resistances ring. Amulet, we're using a marble amulet for the wonderful 1.6% life regeneration per second. On that we just want some life, some resists, and hopefully some dexterity and intelligence to round that out. Shield, right now we're using Rise of the Phoenix. You can also use a Leo crafted reduced damage taken over time shield, preferably tower shield for the extra armor. Our helm, basically just a life armor helm with some resistances if necessary. This one has reduced Purity of Fire mana reservation, which is useful while not required. Lastly, the moneymaker, we have a Karui scepter crafted with the essence of Hysteria. And what you want ideally on this is some increased attack speed, as I have here, and an open suffix to craft weapon range from Vagan. But this one will do just fine. Flat elemental damage is a nice prefix to have, and so is spell damage. The reason we use a Karui scepter is it has the fastest attack speed of the scepters. And yeah, that's pretty much the reason. As for my other links, my chest armor, in order of priority, is Cyclone, linked with Blood Magic, Fortify, life gain on hit, faster attacks, and increased area of effect. Now, since we don't need a curse on hit like most older Righteous Fire builds did, we basically just make it hit as fast as possible and as large a radius as possible. In our boots we have Vortex, Blade Vortex, and cast when damage taken, and we've also just put our Determination in here for convenience sake. In our helm we have Summon Chaos Golem at level 12, Blood Rage at level 12, and cast when damage taken at level 10. The reason for this is because the Summon Chaos Golem goes to 4% physical damage reduction at level 12. We've also got our Enduring Cry in here because we didn't really have sockets for it elsewhere. In our shield we have Leap Slam, linked with faster attacks and blood magic. And in our weapon we are supporting our Fire Burst or Splosion with Controlled Destruction, Iron Will, and Fire Penetration. For flasks we have some nice healing flasks. Eternal Life flasks I find are best because we have such a large life pool that we shouldn't be needing instant flasks. Also, instant flasks don't heal us for much since we have the large life pool. Next we've got the Witchfire Brew, which is what stops us from needing curse on hit and also increases our damage over time during flask effect. It's worth noting that it creates a smoke cloud which gives us some extra defense against a stationary target such as Zaro. Next I'm just using a movement speed flask because I was clearing maps with this thing most recently. And Dying Sun. This flask is not necessary, but it's incredibly powerful for Righteous Fire since it has two effects for us. It increases our maximum fire resistance by 6, causing us to regenerate more life, and it also increases our area of effect by 30%, which is huge for Righteous Fire. If we put on our Righteous Fire and we use the flask, you can see the radius is gargantuan, so that's why we're using that flask. While the flask is quite expensive, it is one of those chase uniques for this build, since there isn't really much in way of chase items that you would want for this build. As for our aura setup, we're using Purity of Fire for that increased maximum fire resistance, helping us sustain Righteous Fire, and Determination, which gives us a whopping 51% more armor at level 20. This is quite a lot, and it boosts our total armor up to 13,000, which is about the sweet spot I find for Juggernaut in particular, as I find myself taking very little from physical damage hits. It remains to be seen how I do in the higher tier 16 and the Shaper, but all the way up to tier 15 maps I was able to tank things like Rigwald, the Chaos Warbands, things like that. So that armor is helping us along with the endurance charges. The golem we're using is obviously the Chaos Golem for the extra physical damage reduction, which rounds us out to 60% without endurance charges. This is just a rough estimate and can't really be trusted, but once you're at maximum endurance charges, you've got guaranteed 44% damage reduction, which stacks on top of your armor, so on average you'll probably get 70 to 90% damage reduction depending on how hard the hit is. It's important not to ignore armor on your gear, as while there's a lot of talk out there that armor isn't doing enough for you, this might be true for things like the Shaper, things like Uberatiri, but everything between the start and the very end game, the armor is going to help you a shit ton. Well, that's pretty much the gear and the build. So this is Cod Raziel, Sir Reginald Amadeus Fortescue III, and Frank saying good luck and stay juicy, and like and subscribe.